All right, Shalom. I want to start by giving our praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rachakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who teach and rule well, and also to their elders, the men that taught them. I pray the Lord have peace, blessings, and mercy upon the households of the hopeful elect. This is the brother Shema One from the Great Millstone Houston Church, and I want to come with a lesson. And this happened. I was looking up this spot I went to in West Virginia called Hawks Nest. And, it's in the mountains. It's real nice and peaceful out there. It's like something you'll see off of a movie where, man, is beautiful out there. And it's in West Virginia. So I was looking up, I was looking that up on YouTube just to see what it looks like. And I came across something that happened out there, some history that goes back to, Esau uh, at his finest, just, being who he is. And it was interesting to me because, you will visit places like that. And I'm speaking from experience. I visited a place like that. And, the Edomites out there looking at you like you don't belong, and it's amazing because little do they know, or they probably do know, them old Edomites, who actually know the history and stuff about things out there. But them Edomites don't even know, you know, how they benefit off of the blood, sweat, and tears off of the Israelites, and they have always, it's always been like that. So, I just want to go into this a little bit, probably jump through it, but it made me think about, it's nothing new. It's nothing new still to this day, 2026, and this goes back to 1930. So I want to play a little bit of this and get a few precepts, and I pray this lesson be edifying to the Lord's elect. So let me play a little bit of this.
764 men walked into a tunnel in West Virginia in 1930.
And looking it up on my own, it's more than 700. It's more than hundreds of men. It goes into thousands because a lot of these men weren't even accounted for when it came to counting the death toll. A lot of the men didn't have the correct records, making it easy to discard of them. It was just a mess. I'll let it play, but a lot of it's the numbers don't add up. That's all I'm saying. It's way more than a couple of hundred.
Within 5 years, they were all dead. Not from a cave-in, not from an explosion, not from any accident that would make headlines or demand investigation. They died choking, drowning in their own lungs, gasping for air that wouldn't come because their chest cavities had turned to wheat from the inside out.
And fair
And
use
the company that killed them,
video.
they knew. They knew from the very first week of drilling that the rock inside that mountain was nearly pure silica. They knew that breathing silica dust destroys human lungs. They knew, and they did nothing. Actually, that's not quite right. They did do something. They made sure the workers who were dying fastest were black men from the South, men with no families nearby to ask questions, men who could be buried in mass graves in the middle of the night without anyone ever knowing their names. This is the story of Hawks Nest Tunnel.
I'll play a little bit more and just speak on what doesn't get played and get a few precepts.
A crime so massive, so deliberate, and so thoroughly covered up that most Americans have never heard of it. But you're going to hear about it today. Every name I can give you, every detail of what those men endured, and exactly who got away with murder. I want you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a story about an accident. Accidents happen when things go wrong despite everyone's best efforts. What happened at Hawks Nest was not an accident. It was a calculated decision to sacrifice human lives for profit. Every death in that tunnel was preventable, every single one. The men who made the decisions that killed those workers knew exactly what they were doing. And they did it anyway. The year was 1930, and America was falling apart. The stock market had.
Yeah, I'll stop it right there. So going into how it was intentional, and that's because Esau Esau can do that. Okay, the power is in his hand, and that's what he does with the power, especially targeting Jake. All right, just going into it, just a little backdrop from what I remember. Um, a lot of Jake. Well, first from up north, a lot of recruiters were going down south looking for Jake, who were working on on the plantations. You had sharecropping heavy out there in the south, so they would come and recruit for this great project, up north in the Appalachian Mountains, and they would bribe them with money, telling them, they'll start off at 30 cents or higher whenever that was a lie. And pretty much Jake looking for an opportunity, to better themselves and take care of their family with an honest job, you know, something better than where they were. But Esau took advantage of it, and bringing them to some of the worst conditions, that you could possibly work in, and mistreating them to the point where it was, man, they didn't even treat them like men. It's horrible. But let me read this. This is Micah chapter 2. In verse 1, it says, "Woe to them that devise iniquity, and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hands." And going into this account, the man, this tragedy, of what happened at Hawksness, it was planned out. It was it was well thought of, and Esau still made the move to just go ahead with it, knowing that a many Israelites are going to lose their lives in this process, because it's in the power of their hands to get away with it. It's in the power of their hands to control the situation, and this is just a little piece, but it just shows you the track record of Esau. You don't even have to be looking for something, and it's just coming out now. And it's beautiful because it's no coincidence. Look at the time we're in. We're at the end of his age, the end of his world, and is man, it's so much where he can't even hide, because reading events like this, and this happened in the 1930s. Look at what's going on today in the earth, and look who's doing it. Look who's actually taking peace from the planet, from the people. Look who can't be trusted. Look who's always lying and breaking deals. Esau. Esau on a world level, on a global level. Let me get this. Let me read a little bit, because on Chat GPT, um, I asked, what is it called? Hold on. I said, what is the term called when you find something out that you're not looking for? And it says serendipity, but that's more of a positive thing. Then I was like, well, what's that? In a negative sense. But it just came up with unwelcome discovery, unfortunate discovery, a rude awakening, harsh reality, like stuff like that. But it just it's just evident that Esau's, he can't run no more. Everywhere you go, wherever wherever evil is, how Esau tried to turn it on the Israelites, us being the savage people, and just the people who just can't get right always, just just death and violence, right? No, look at these niggas. Everywhere you go on the earth, the violence is attached to them. A history goes back to them. All right. But let me read a little bit on the event, a little history on it. So it says, in the early 1930s, workers Many of them black laborers, including migrants, were hired to drill a tunnel through silica-rich rock. It says due to extremely unsafe conditions and lack of protection, a large number developed silicosis. In hundreds, possibly over 1,000, no, it's thousands. It says, depending on estimates, died. It's widely considered one of the worst industrial disasters in U.S. history, and it involves several explorations in racial injustice. And shit. Whenever I was in West Virginia, um, that 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 spirit of racism, Esau showing you who he is, was heavy out there. To the point where I remember this one spot couldn't even go through the front. You had to. They treated you like you wasn't even good enough to walk through the front door. You had to go through the back. And mind you, this is shit when I was in middle school. You know, I lived out there for like 2 years. But just remembering that, um, so imagine how it was. I can't even imagine how it was in the 1930s. You know, Jim Crow and shit. But let's go down. It says, let me read a little bit of the environment and stuff. I'm trying to look for it. So it says they cut straight through rock that was packed with silica. That matters because silica dust, when inhaled, it shreds the lungs and causes silicosis, a slow, suffocating death. But here's what it turns from, or it says, but here's where it turns from dangerous to outright unjust. It says workers, many of them quote unquote black laborers, Israelites, brought in from the south, it says, were sent into the tunnel with little to no protective equipment. And mind you, at the same time, you got Edomites out there working too, but they're not thrown into harm's way like Jake. They're not in there like that, exposed to that like Jake is. And mind you, Esau is getting paid more money. Jake is out there, left his family to go work. And on the work site, they have cabins for Jake where it was trashly built, no what is that shit? What's the word? Insulation, no insulation, no heating, no plumbing, none of that. In you know, overly crowded, way too many Jakes crowded up in a little shack to sleep and shit. All right. Then on top of that, they had a market in the work camp where Jake wasn't finna walk through the mountains to go into town to buy shit from the market in town, right? So they shot the prices up where your hard working money that you want to save for you and your family, or that is for you. No, that's done. You can't even you needed to survive out there, and Esau strategically did that shit to pocket everything where Jake had little to nothing at the end of the day. While Esau getting money from that tunnel, that project, and this nigga is hoarding the actual silica inside of the tunnel, and making bread off of that, selling it, because you use silica for certain steels and different type of industrial materials. So Esau is a damn devil, and it goes back to who it goes back to who runs the earth right now, still to this day, and who we are in the hands of with our jobs to this day. These corporations, Elder Taza probably did a beautiful lesson on that, going into the corporations. It's a body of death. All right. But the beauty of it is they not finna get away with that. Yahweh Shah is gonna recompense them. They're gonna have a recompense. But it says, going back to the little article, it says dust levels were so thick men could barely see, yet they were expected to keep drilling. Some ships ran long hours, roughly about 10 to 12 hours. It says in those conditions day after day. And it just keeps getting worse. Keeps getting worse. It says, um, the company knew the risks of silica exposure. They chose speed and profit over human life. Yep. And that's what it goes back to, those corporations. And I believe the main in it, man, the main two, it just goes back to, Esau being a devil. But the main two corporations were where, it's in history, you know, Jake, the families who went back and tried to get a settlement didn't get shit. A couple of $100. The biggest payouts you see, like low thousands, single digits. But anyway, let me let me play a little bit more. No, that was it. Let me read this in the book of James, the 5th chapter. I'm gonna read it in the NLT. James chapter 5 and verse 4 in the NLT. One second. James chapter 5 and verse 4 in the NLT. It says, "For listen, hear the cries of the field workers whom you have cheated." And again, just going into that, promising Jake 30 cents to 50 cents a day. And, Jake sharecropping in the South, they look at that as an opportunity, you know. But guess what? Esau lied. And whenever they got out there, it's like whatever you were making has to go back to Esau. So you're left with little to nothing. And that's what we experience at this day, man. This shit is, the scale is off balance. It says again in the NLT, James 5 and 4, "For listen, hear the cries of the field workers whom you have cheated for their pay. The cries of those who harvest your fields have reached the ears of the Lord Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua of heaven's armies." And in the KJV it says the Lord of Sabaoth, which means the Lord of armies. But same thing. Same thing to this day. This is Esau. This is what Esau does whenever he has the power to do it. Lie, cheat, and steal, and murder. But I'll share the link in the comment section. It was interesting, just coming across something you ain't even looking for, and it just exposes Esau. How beautiful we are in these days where Esau is being exposed. Let me read this. Oh, two, just to add, yesterday I was in I was visiting a brother in a little, say in a little town, right? And we were just walking through the town, and even they had memorials. They had a big oak tree, and it was just in a nice little garden area. And I'm talking about a huge oak tree. It had huge trees. And I told him, I was like, man, in Louisiana, you hear stories about trees like that. They keep them around where it's like a memorial where they used to hang Jake. And it was like the same thing where we were. The town, little dusty ass town, but in the center of it is this nice, vibrant place. There's just like Esau leaves his tracks, his memorial, so to speak, but it's attached to murder. you know, it's attached to violence, and yeah, man, it's horrible, man. This man has to pay for all of that. This man has took peace from the whole earth. You know, let me get this First Maccabees, the first chapter. Because wherever Esau goes, this is what happens. Whenever Esau multiplies, this is what happens. Oh, let me pull it up on my phone. This is First Maccabees chapter 1 in verse, straight to the point. Verse 7. First Maccabees 1 and 7, it says, So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. And we're talking about Edomites here. It says, So did their sons after them many years. Okay. So Esau, you know, in authority, Esau with some type of rank, Esau with power. And what happens? And evils were multiplied in the earth, and now it has reached the whole entire, it covers the whole earth. Evils are multiplied. Proverbs 29 and 16. When the wicked, we're talking about Esau here, when the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases and it continues to spread everywhere. It's not just there. No, it spreads, it increases. All right. But the righteous shall see their fall, because Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, is patient, and long suffering, just like it says in the book of Ecclesiastes 8 and 11. And that will happen. Esau has a lot of blood on his hands throughout the recent history. 1930, that's not that long ago. But I'll close it out with this in Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 11. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, what Esau has been doing for hundreds of years, for longer than that. All right. It says, Therefore, the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. So just because they're able to continue to do it and get away without getting a punishment or judgment that is deserving, it hardens their mind. It does something to them where they think they can continue to do it, and they entertain it and they do it. All right, but guess what? It says, though a sinner do evil 100 times and his days be prolonged, right? It's like they could just keep doing this evil shit. They could keep cheating, lying, stealing, killing, just being the wicked and doing what the wicked do. It says, though a sinner do evil 100 times, time after time, and his days be prolonged, nothing happens. Still living. Yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua, which fear before him. Yeah, those that fear Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua, right? Hey, they're gonna be mindful. They're not gonna continue to do an evil work. Hey, one, because the Lord is gonna judge you speedily. The Lord ain't gonna deal with you like a Edomite. The Lord ain't gonna deal with you like a heathen, a son of man. All right, if you belong to Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua, you get chastised, you get dealt with like a son, and that's mercy, where you don't continue to do whatever it was that we were led to do. But the nations don't get dealt with so, because vengeance is gonna be Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua's first and foremost. So they got that lot. Verse 13, but it shall not be well with the wicked. So guess what? It's not gonna continue to be like that. Like they just keep getting away. Like, damn, no, judgment is coming. It says, but it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushua. And that's how it's gonna be. All right. That is how it is going to be. Esau will get judged, and he has a lot of blood on his hands. He touched the apple of the Lord's eye, first and foremost. All right. So I'll end it there. Yeah, I'll copy and paste this video in the comment section, Lord willing. So yeah, again, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushua, Bahashem Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who teach and rule well. And Lord willing, until the next time I say shalom.